North wind doth blow and we shall have snow, as the old rhyme goes. Well, the northerly winds blew in a storm the other day. Some of you saw a couple of my videos late last week where it was blowing a gale. Yeah, well, it brought in a dusting of snow. But it's freezing, it's -3 degrees C at the moment. So it is a cold one. That's the weather update from Northern England today. So hello everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. And in this video we're gonna cover the last episode of the Truth in the Hills series. So I've got a little playlist for the Truth in the Hills. So if you've missed some episodes, you know, due to the holidays that you guys have had in the US, then please do go to that playlist and you can kind of just watch them one after another. Start the first episode and work your way up. Before I talk about this, I'll just reiterate why I've done this series. Because a few people have said you're just trying to create content, you're just repeating yourself, you know, this is old news. Guys, look, we're what, 5.5 months in to Summerwell's disappearance, and there has been so much misinformation about this case that it was time, and I'm not the only creator that has felt this, right? Other creators have done this, is to try to cut through all the misinformation and go right back to the beginning. That's why I posted all the press conferences over on my second channel, Michelle Walks. Link to that in the description. That's why I'm doing this series, to look at the facts, the few facts that we know about this case from the beginning. Look at the parents' statements. Look at what the media said. Look at what the possible theories could be that can explain Summer's disappearance. You know, something happened to her. People don't just vaporise, as Dr. Phil told Don and Candice. Something happened. But what? And that is what a lot of people who are following this case in the true crime community really want to find out. But in addition to the parent statements, addition to what was said by Ellie in the media in those early days, we've also got to consider the culture, the environment in which Summer Wells was growing up. We've got to understand possible issues in that local area. That's why I've made several videos about trafficking. That's why I've really started to research trafficking. And we know that trafficking is a big problem in East Tennessee. But in addition to that, the local community that Summer Wells was growing up in, the Beach Creek community, which is situated a few miles out of Rogersville and a few miles out of Kingsport. It kind of sits in the middle. And that land has been farmed, has been lived on, has been worked by families who over the last couple of centuries have become interconnected by marriage, but also interconnected by the environment, the harshness of those hills. And through generations of intermarriage, we know that those family connections are strong. But also, as I talked about in my video, is it 2 weeks ago now, where I did all the history, we know that families can feud. And no, it doesn't necessarily have to be open warfare. It can be a low simmering resentment. That's what happens in communities where ties are strong, right? So we've got to keep that as an underpinning of everything, because it could be relevant, because summer did not just vaporise. Now, I didn't post one of these walking videos yesterday on this channel because I wanted to concentrate on the content for my other channel, for Crime Story Sunday, episode 6, which was, I think it was a good one. But I did post late last night my time, very late last night my time. I posted a little video. It's only 7.5 minutes, so if you have missed it, I know some people are not getting notified of these videos, so if you have missed it, please go over and watch it, because it's a demonstration using Ben Hill Road and just two plots of land on Ben Hill Road. 110 Ben Hill Road, where Summer grew up, and 125 Ben Hill Road, which is just over the road. It's like the two first properties, one either side of Ben Hill Road. Those two properties, I've heard it said, act as sentinels of that road, and then the road goes up into the mountain. And in terms of getting up there in a car, it's a dead end. Yes, you can turn right and go down Simpson Road and then come out on Beach Creek. You can go up Ben Hill Road. You can't get up there in a vehicle, but you can walk right up into the mountains. You can see it as clear as day on any map. So it's a hollow, like many others, that lead up into the mountains. So I've talked about all of that, all important, all potentially relevant. Now, let's consider another theory. So I've talked about abduction and how kind of unlikely, I mean, nothing's impossible, right? Nothing is impossible, and everything is still on the table, and everyone is still on the table, according to Sheriff Ronnie Lawson. So we can't point blank rule anything out. But in my opinion, considering everything, looking at the bigger picture, I find stranger abduction really, really unlikely. And I also find any abduction really unlikely where the parents, the parent, Candice, mum, and then grandma, and 3 brothers who were in the house playing video games, did not notice anyone on the property. I find it difficult to believe. I also find it difficult to believe that someone just wandered off. You know, what I'm trying to do in this series is think about the whys first, think about possible motives first, and then that leads us into the how and the who. But if we think about the why in terms of Summer wandering off, why would she wander off? But then that brings in issues with the timeline, because none of the what has been said by the parents, by witnesses, by law enforcement, based on the 911 calls that we haven't heard, but we have heard the dispatch call, and we've heard that Summer was only missing 10 minutes. We've heard from neighbour Jodie Sue, who said she heard the boys and Candice start to shout, holler for Summer, about 6 o'clock. And the 911 calls were made shortly before 6:30. Did the family only realise that Summer was missing at 6 o'clock, and actually she could have been missing for a couple of hours? If so, a kid wandering off who's got a 2-hour head start, well, anything could have happened to her. There's so many dangers. One of them is being picked up by an SO. And there are several registered SOs in that local area. One very close in the next holler along. Summer had a 2-hour head start, and she wandered off and she got picked up by an SO, registered or otherwise. Then if it is somebody in the local community, somebody knows something But because of that tightness, that tight-knittedness of the community, you would never find out. You're never going to find a body because people in those hollers will protect each other. I don't know, 5-year-olds sometimes can do strange things that you wouldn't expect. So I don't rule that out. The accident, again, I talked about the accident in my last video like 2 days ago in this series. And I know a lot of people are wedded to the accident theory, but for all the reasons I outlined in that video, I just don't know. I just don't see it. So the only other alternative, if we, let's say, all of these previous theories are possible, but it's kind of unlikely. Like, statistically, none of it's likely. It really isn't. But summer didn't just vaporise. So, is another way to look at this, is in that Summer's disappearance was intentional. Being sold covers a couple of different scenarios. So you could sell a child into trafficking permanently, make a permanent sale. Right, now this might have been a premeditated event by the parents, or at least maybe one parent and the other parent doesn't know. So you can put that scenario on the table, but you have to think why. Right, not how, why, to start off with. So what would be the motive for the parents selling Summer? Well, it might be that they're in debt. They're in debt to an organised crime gang who they've somehow got wrangled up with. You know, there's lots of drugs. There is lots of crime in that area. Sure, most people are lovely, but just like in my area, right? Most people are lovely. But there's gangs, there's people you wouldn't want to cross. And there's a lot of drugs. We know that Don and Candice have got shady pasts. We know that Don and Candice are addicts. We know that Don Wells has said that Candice got mixed up with the wrong people. But we also know that Candice has been thrown under the bus by Don. And I absolutely believe that Don also knows lots of wrong people, whatever he means by that. But if wrong people are people within organised crime, people within drug circles that perhaps they've been buying drugs off, and unfortunately they've run up a debt that had to be paid off. Well, that's one motive for selling a kid. It's pretty final, it's pretty horrific, but it does happen. It absolutely does happen. Now, I toyed with this idea for a long time. I made several videos about how I believed that the whole day was premeditated, that everything they did that day was thought out and premeditated. From Don taking the Subaru to work instead of his normal work truck. Now remember, he was working down in Jonesborough, which is about 35 to 40 minutes south of 110 Ben Hill Road. So his work truck doesn't have GPS, but the Subaru, brand new Subaru, only a few months old, does. And we know Don has since come out and said that Starlink, the GPS system, is one of his alibis. Well, why would he need alibis? He's meant to be a victim of his child going missing. Why does he believe he needs 7 alibis plus Starlink? And Candice has none. He throws her under the bus whenever he can. Candice has none. You have no alibis. I've got 7 alibis, and my best friend Starlink, or some nonsense he said in one drunken rant. I always go back to this, that in text messages, so Facebook Messenger messages, to Emma, Crime Stories Obsessed, a couple of months ago now, she had been talking to Grandma via Facebook, and we've heard very little from Grandma. In fact, nothing. We haven't heard anything from Grandma, apart from these handful of tidbits that we get from people who've been speaking to her on Facebook. And I do believe that Emma was speaking to Grandma. And there's a confusion in that timeline Well, she goes through the usual script, the planting flowers, da-da-da-da, all of that. But then she said that final photograph of Summer was taken an hour and a half before they got home. Well, they were only like 10 minutes away from home when that photo was taken. We know where that photo was taken based on the road signs. We know where it was taken. It was taken around the junction of Lone Star Road, which leads on to Beach Creek, and Mirrell Road, which takes you south, and it can take you to Jonesboro. Where did they go between taking that photo and getting home? And I made videos, a couple of videos actually, arguing that perhaps Summer did not make it home at all. They handed Summer off to somebody and they sold her. And I've kind of talked myself out of that, because I don't know, it's like, how can any parent do that? How could they do that? But we know that parents do that. But I think more common than a permanent sale would be a temporary transaction, a temporary sale, if you know what I'm saying. And familial trafficking, I mean, I suppose you could call it familial child prostitution, is surprisingly common. And East Tennessee is one of the hotbeds for it. We know there are lots of registered SOs who've victimised children in that area. There would be a market, however horrible it seems, there would be a market for a little girl who's as pretty as Summer. So I've always toyed, and it's one of my favourite theories now. I talked myself into it. At the beginning of the case, I said absolutely not, no way, the parents did not sell her. That's a ridiculous thing to say. There is no way on God's green earth that they would have sold Summer or rented her out. There's something not adding up at all with the timeline. There's things not adding up with the day. There's just a lot of weirdness. So one way to describe and explain this weirdness would be if there was a level of premeditation. I don't know, what do you think? What do you think? Because in terms of Occam's razor, it's not the simplest explanation, because you've got to be able to, first of all, say they absolutely meant to sell Summer, whether it's a permanent one or not. So the motive is money, and that they absolutely don't give two shits about their daughter, quite frankly. Pardon my French. You've got to get that first. And then you've got to think about, well, how? Well, the how's relatively straightforward. If you say, well, they took a detour and they handed her off. But then, if she didn't go home at all, and the planting flowers and all that stuff is a complete lie, the three brothers also have to be in on the lie. Because part of that story was that the brothers saw Summer going into the basement. So they have to lie as well. Now, Candice wasn't to know that the boys were going to be taken into CPS custody and fostered. She wasn't to know that. So the boys could have been talking. I mean, as with the other theories, the boys' testimonies are absolutely vital. You know, if they say something different than the parents, it's their word against the parents' word. So it's still very circumstantial, it's still very shaky. A defence could rip it apart. But the boys have to be in on the lie. So, to make it easier, you know, as per Occam's razor, you could say, well, maybe someone came and picked Summer up. You know, they got home, they did the planting flowers. You know, it's basically true, except she didn't go down and play in the basement. Or she may have done. She may have been told to go and play in the basement. The boy saw her going down there. But then she's picked up by someone that the parents know, or at least one of the parents know. There is that possibility, and then they can very easily say this was an abduction. But that puts the person who picked her up at risk of being seen. So it kind of has to be somebody somebody who's not going to raise any suspicion. You see, so there's all that to think about. But if we're talking about selling Summer into trafficking, we also have to acknowledge that the parents might be totally innocent. And actually the sale was after an abduction. The abduction thing happened, and then Summer's then been sold on into trafficking. Now, if we can work away where the abduction theory works, then somebody abusing her for their own purposes is one thing, but then selling her on into trafficking because we know it's big business is another. But if she's sold into trafficking, she could well be alive, whether the parents sold her or not. I don't know, what do you think? You know, if the parents rented her out to an SO and they promised to return her and they didn't, so there's all of these different how it might have happened, but I'm trying to stay away from the how in this series, not before we've realised and actualised the why. So there are good whys, there are good motives for the trafficking sold scenario. There are good motives for it. People have said that, the parents and even others in the area, you know, they're just country bumpkins, they wouldn't be involved in any of that. That's absolute nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. Because we know drugs are rife. We know that networks that have built up generationally, those hollers, those family ties, are very, very tight in that part of the world. And the organisations that developed, you know, selling moonshine, those networks are still very sturdy and have, you know, there's a trust that's been built up between families generationally, into marriages generationally. So it's not a stretch at all to say that those networks, you know, in more recent generations have been used organisationally to sell drugs. And then a fraction of those, only a fraction of those have realised that actually trafficking humans is very, very lucrative. So using the same networks, the same trust bonds that have been there generationally, that they know people won't talk, they know it's all hidden, they know who to trust and who not to trust. They don't like outsiders for this reason. They want outsiders out. I can definitely buy the trafficking theory. And although you have to understand the nature of trafficking and also the nature of that area and why trafficking is big in that area, you have to understand that first before you can accept that this could well have happened to Summer. How and who, we can debate. But why, the motive, ultimately, is money. So this is the last in the series, The Truth in the Hills. So starting tomorrow, we're going to look at the latest developments. We're going to start really digging into the genealogies. And I hope you stay with me. I know a lot of people have turned off this case because of the drama and don't watch the videos at all anymore. Anything to do with Summer Wells, they don't watch it. And I think that's a real shame. Because the more eyes we've got on Summer, the better. Quit the drama and just concentrate on what we know and what we can find out and develop theories from that. All right, so it's goodbye from me. Well, I thought they were going to bump into me then. It's goodbye from a very frisky this morning, Miss Tillington. She's very frisky this morning. And Miss Cassie Springer. I think they like this cold weather. I don't like snow, but I do want it to kind of come down very thickly. Just for a day. To see what Cassie thinks of it. Tilly loves it, I know that. But I want to see what Cassie does. I could do a snow video, a snow day video for Cassie's YouTube channel. Alright guys, I'll let you go. Bye for now.